So we're just doing some basic chalk lines here, just so I stay somewhat within the parameters. We're possibly going to exaggerate the size of this rock a little bit, as that's the subject matter. It's pretty dirty, but it's still, this is not going to mess with the paint because it's pretty much set in that paper. So we're just mixing up, that's a liquid ultramarine and just a regular high viscosity. I'm going to be working in a fairly liquid state, but it really doesn't matter if I had used a high viscosity ultramarine. It just happened to be handy. So what we're going to do is we're going to do pretty much a sacrificial drawing in paint, meaning that very little of this will survive. So, but it just gives me something to work on when I'm doing the base colors for the paint. This will likely get covered almost entirely. So continuing on with blocking in the major colors of the rock, we have yellow deep, a warm red. It's actually a pyro red, but it's just the fact that it's warm that's important. That's phthalo blue, which we'll use later, but and we have white, as well as the ultramarine and burnt sienna we already had down. So we're just going to block in that color. So to get that color of the shield, you're going to want the yellow and the a little bit of red. That red is very strong in comparison. I really do have way too much red down there. And so you need a little bit of the ultramarine just to desaturate that down a bit. I think we're going to get white in there. I think we'll just get a little more water in that. I'm actually going to scoop up a lot of white. I just want a little bit more paint than what we've got going there. I think we're just going to push that red a little bit more. So most of that is right in there, and you can see that we're losing that drawing pretty quickly. But the drawing really wasn't meant to survive. So we're going to come over here and just add a little bit of blue into that. Not enough white. So we're just putting this paint down very loosely. The main thing is we want are these various shifts in color that are a lot more difficult to do once you've gotten into the detailed work. So we're going to put some of these darker colors down the bottom. So we're throwing this color down the bottom. We're actually, that's going to be the water, but while we've got the color on the brush, we're just going to sweep some of that down into the water. We will do other work on the water with other colors, but that's just a fast and easy way to get. So it's scumbling there a bit, so I'm just adding a bit of water to get that color to fill in a little bit better than it is. Just going back in, filling in a little bit of the spots where the canvas is showing through. The exact location of these colors isn't that critical. It's just that we want to have some of these lovely colors mixing together. So we're just going to quickly paint in the sky using ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, and white. And normally I think we'll start at the, I've turned the canvas the other way around just to put it closer to me to paint. So we're mixing up a sky blue, pushing down on that brush to get any of that unmixed color out. I think I want a bit more paint than what we've got there, and I want it a bit darker. Yeah, the phthalo blue is quite a bit stronger. I'm not getting any though. Quite a bit stronger than ultramarine blue, so take some care when using that. We don't need a lot of this. Doing what all those Kool-Aid drinkers say don't do, don't paint the edges. What I mean when I say a Kool-Aid drinker, I mean it's someone who's doesn't have a real good reason for saying something. It's something they do without thought. They just make a judgment statement, and we should always try to avoid to make judgment statements. So what I've done is I've just add some water to that, rather some white to that, and I'm just going to put that down below like that, and then we'll smooth that out. And we're going to add more white again, just making it lighter near the horizon. I don't think we're going to go for a really smooth blend this time. We're going to go for making it a little bit more expressive. And sweepy, sort of like we've got in the rock coloration there. So we don't have to be too terribly close down there, as we're going to have a tree line right there. Just putting a few brush marks in there, sort of have the same character as what we've got down below. I've just put a chalk line down the bottom to differentiate where the rock stops and the water starts. We could go in and draw a series of chalk lines representing where we're going to put the cracks, but I think for now I just want to do this freehand, just keep it a little bit more expressive. So I've put a chalk line down where the water is starting and the rock ends, and I could chalk in a whole lot of the cracks and whatnot, but I think I'm going to go for more of a freehand approach. And it is whatever you're comfortable with. I've never been a real fan of staying inside the lines. And I'm using a sort of a desaturated dark blue to sketch in some of these rocks. And I am going to just clean in the brush there. And so I can take some of that color and just sort of glaze it into the other color just to give a little bit more variety. This is a very broken up section of rock. This is granite, and granite is, this is part of the Canadian Shield. This is actually up near Killarney, and it's a absolutely stunning area, but this rock has a very interesting character because it's ground smooth when it's was in the direction of the glacier, scraping it smooth over hundreds of tons of ice, but then it would at times freeze to the rock, and when it froze to the rock and that weight of that ice started moving it again, it would actually fracture off pieces of the rock, giving it these rather large chunks of broken rock. I've switched to a slightly darker color. I was using the rigger on its side, trying hard to keep this as random as possible. So I'm looking at the reference constantly here, but I don't care if I'm actually copying any given piece of rock, but what I want to do is capture the nature of how this rock is fractured and keep it. I find often times when people are trying to get it exactly, they do this a tremendous drawing, but the painting gets rather tight and can look kind of contrived. So I'm coming into these orange colors to do some of the more subtle scratching in here and there. So someone who is smarter than me would actually start to do this stuff on the top rather than on the bottom, so that there's less chance of dragging your hand through it. It's funny how you know all these things, but remembering to do them is another. when you're doing these lines, try to give them as much character as you can. Don't just do a thick line that's even, you know, make it thicker and then make it thinner and give it as much character as you can. And cracks are very much like that. And it does start to look very contrived if you compare this drawing to the original one that we started with, you won't find too much in similarity. And again, I don't care if it looks like that particular rock, I just want it to look like rock of the Canadian Shield. And capture some of the qualities that makes this rock so stunning. For a left-handed person, this is where I should have started at the top and on the right-hand side, so I don't have to drag my hand through wet paint at any point. GoPro stop recording. So I'm using a fairly light gray. Sometimes when you're laying these lines down, you think they're not going to be dark enough, but you just have to get used to how much they're going to dry darker. I'm going to, let's get a little bit more into some red cracks in this area. You want to keep these colors moving as much as possible. So any color that we've managed to lay down in our initial wet and wet color range, we can incorporate into these cracks, and it's just going to look that much more interesting. And up there is finger glaze. You're not really trying to take the paint off, you're just trying to smudge it down a bit, make it a little bit more interesting. So we'll probably fiddle with these rocks a little bit more later, but I want to get some of this further the reflection in the water. So we're just coming, so this is going to be a bit of glazing, just adding a little bit more color. I think I want to get that a little darker. And I needed to get the rock at least part way down there just so that we could get the right colors in the reflection where there's dark above and where to strip it out. So the color underneath is dry, so by coming in with a wet brush, I can soften the edges and have a more natural sheen to the reflection. Sorry about these stalls, but every once in a while I like to think about what I'm doing. So just a little off camera, you can see what I'm doing is I'm cleaning the brush and then I'm removing excess water by squeezing it rather than using a paper towel, because I want some of that, I want a certain amount of moisture, but I don't want a lot. So we're just going to move up into these trees. In this reference, these trees are either in behind the rock or they're young trees, because they're certainly not very big trees. This rock itself is probably 3 or 4 times the height of a person. So we're working with phthalo blue and burnt sienna to give us a really dark green. This is pretty much black, but we'll be using a little bit more white in that as we proceed. Just giving these trees a nice iconic Ontario shape. they get windswept like this because they are out in the open. This is right on Georgian Bay, and so they get some pretty fierce storms coming and blowing them, and ice breaking off branches. It's beautiful country, but it's pretty harsh in the winter there. So we've got a little paint daub of something there. So what we can do is we can actually make that a taller tree rather than having to worry about fixing that later. It's one of the things that's so much better about painting than, say, photography, because a tree's in the way or a scene could use another tree. It's pretty easy for us to add that in there. Photographers, not so much. There's an awful lot of times when I've been out shooting, I would have loved to take in a chainsaw with me so I can cut down a few trees that were in the way of what I wanted to paint, but Parks Canada and such don't really approve of that kind of behavior. So we're just going to put a little bit more detail on these ones. We might do some negative painting through some of these more solid branches later. We're just going to mix up some blue that looks quite similar to what's up above. I've got to be careful with that. Might have to get some clean. Yeah, I'm just going to have to drop it. A little bit of phthalo blue down. That phthalo blue on our palette is now contaminated with burnt sienna, so giving a green cast. This is going to be a glaze in the water. So just, I think it could use a little bit more ultramarine. And I think that should be good. So now we're just going to get, have a clean brush ready. We're just going to put a band of this along the bottom. And then using a clean brush, I squeeze out with my fingers, not a paper towel. You need a certain, so I'm just going to go back and forth over that line just to blend that into the dry vertical blends there. So we're going to see if we can't get a little bit more of the shadow in here. So we're just mixing up some more of that ultramarine burnt sienna black, and I think we'll use a smaller brush. So So we're just going to start adding a few ripples, and I'm working in that blue that I glazed in with, and these ripples are, so they sort of are going to disappear into the glaze but stand out a little bit more. And so, same as always, we're trying not to be repetitious. And come into a dark ripple. This is mostly reflections coming from the rock shadows. Going to blend that water right into the rock itself. These ripples are coming at the shoreline a little bit at an angle, but as they get closer to the rock themselves, they often flatten out. GoPro, stop recording. So we're just going to put a little bit of highlight on these trees. So we'll add some white into that. We're just trying to find a green that ties in with what we've got and doesn't look too that's a fairly complicated green mix. I inadvertently picked up some red, which is fine. And so we're just going to come in and so we're hitting the green on the top parts of the branches where the light would be catching it. I don't think we're going to do a terrific amount on there.